This is Rick Carlson doing my social issue part 2. Kind of go over some of the things I brought up last time, talking about when the child is considered a new life, another being, I guess. According to the Family Research Council, is when the human sperm penetrates the human ovum or egg, a new entity comes into existence. At this stage, it's called a zygote. Zygote is the name of the first cells formed at conception. It is composed of human DNA and other human molecules, so its nature is undeniably human and is not some other species. What I think they're more or less talking about is the fact that people argue, when is it a new human being, when is it a new life? Some people even go as far as say once the child takes its first breath, to kind of minimize how they interpret, are they killing another human, or is it not a child yet? Is it, what stage is it at? Well, like I said, Family Research Council considers that to be a zygote, and it's because of the cells formed, human DNA, and some other things. The new human zygote has a genetic composition that is absolutely unique from itself, different from any other human that has ever existed. So obviously it starts getting its own identity, including that of its mother. So it does become a separate being. It's a separate entity from just being part of the mother, another organ. So people say that it's a woman in her body. Well, that kind of disputes that argument, that it's not just another part of the woman, but it's a new life form as a whole. At this point, the zygote is unable to be fed, it would die. So in other words, it's not, if the new life form's not being fed, if it's not being taken care of, if it starts to have, issues, it will independently die, so it does become a separate life form. It's also clear that the earliest human embryo is biologically alive. It fulfills the 4 criteria needed to establish biological life: metabolism, growth, reaction to stimuli, and reproduction. So at that point, all of that can happen, and that's before it even becomes a zygote. Finally, is the human zygote merely a new kind of cell, or is it a human organism? So basically that question is it a new human being? Well, scientists define an organism as a complex structure of interdependent elements constituted to carry on the activities of life by separately functioning but mutually dependent organs. The human zygote meets the definition with ease. Once formed, it initiates a complex sequence of events to ready it for continued development and growth. So as far as when, this is kind of my point on, you're not just, again, killing part of the woman in her body. It is another life form. Get my notes here. And then the Health and Research Funding Org has a couple of other issues, or a couple other points. Women who have had abortion, this is going to speak upon some of the statistics for depression and what the women go through if they do have an abortion. So obviously to prevent a lot of these statistics, you want to fulfill the child out to birth. But women who had an abortion are 3 times more likely than women of childbearing age in general population to commit suicide. So if you have an abortion, statistically you're 3 times more likely to have to commit suicide. Also, women who have had an abortion are 34% more likely to develop an anxiety disorder, and that's in comparison to women that obviously do not have the abortion, that carry out the birth of the child. 2 out of 3 women who have had late abortions, or after 12 weeks, suffer from the clinical definition of PTSD. So there does become the concern of a lot of health issues for the mother if they do carry on and have the abortion. So it's not just about whether the child is dying, but it's also for care of the mother. Studies research For the studies, research analyzed data on almost 900,000 women, including over 150,000 who had an abortion. They found women who had an abortion experienced 81% increased risk for mental problems, mental instability, depression, things like that. The British Journal of Psychology also found women who had an abortion were 34% more likely to develop an anxiety disorder, 37% more likely to experience depression, 110% more likely to abuse alcohol, 155% more likely to commit suicide, and 220% more likely to use marijuana. And I know there's a lot of arguments about marijuana being good or bad, but it's more about the trend of drug use inappropriately versus appropriately. Abusing alcohol, kind of going back to that too, yeah, it's legal, but it's about the abuse and the stress and the mental disorders that you can develop once you go through such a traumatic event. In 2004, abort73.com and the Guttmacher Institute, I'm sure I butchered that name, anonymously surveyed 1,200 post-abortive women from 9 different abortion clinics across the country. Some of the statistics that they came out with as far as why the women had abortions. Everybody likes to talk about rape and incest, and that those are obviously, this isn't as clean and easy a subject as this report is trying to portray it is, but for rape and for incest, it is less than 1% of all the aborted children in the study. So everybody wants to use that to kind of hang their argument on, and yeah, that would probably be one of the things that I would be open more for conversation, but people use that as if that's the driving factor behind abortions. That's one of the big reasons, people kind of throw it at you. Well, this is why I had abortions. Well, it's really less than 1% of all the rapes performed. Fetal health problems was 3%, physical health problems was 4%, interfere with education or careers 4%. So most of the things that people you hear about are really very low statistically. Some of the higher statistic ones, 25%, are just people that, or women that didn't feel they were ready to have a child, which kind of gets back into the responsibility for life. Having an abortion shouldn't just be a nonchalant, well, I don't really want to be accountable for my decisions, so I'm going to have an abortion. So that's obviously the predominant statistic on why, but some of the other things that they found, if you just studied the state of Florida, 0.001% of pregnancies resulted from an incestuous relationship. So if you break it down to by state, it wasn't even, it's like I said, 0.001%. Some of the other ones where women's psychological health was threatened by pregnancy was 0.29%. So statistically, the big driving factor is that people just don't feel that they need to, or that they don't want to be parents, or they're not ready. And I think that's a really bad reason. So that's why my argument is for pro-life. Thank you.